There is a moment just after the wind stops when the surface of a pond becomes completely still. Not frozen, not empty, just still. The water holds the sky without effort. It reflects clouds, trees, the passing of light. And if you watch closely, you notice something. The pond is not trying to be still, it simply is. The wind has passed, and what remains is the water's natural state. This is not a metaphor for emptiness. It is not a symbol of perfection. It is just what happens when conditions allow the water to rest. Nibbana, sometimes called nirvana, is often spoken of as the goal of Buddhist practice. The word itself means cessation, or cooling, or going out, like a flame that has consumed its fuel. But when we hear this, the mind immediately begins to construct. We imagine a destination, a state to achieve, a transformation so complete that we will finally, permanently, be at peace. And yet the Buddha spoke of Nibbana not as something to gain, but as something already present when certain conditions cease, like the pond after the wind, not created by effort, revealed by the ending of what obscures. Right now, as you listen, there is breath moving in and out of the body. There is the sensation of contact where the body meets the surface beneath it. There is hearing. These are not obstacles to peace. They are simply what is happening. And within them, if we look carefully, there is no solid, permanent self directing the show. There is just process, just arising and passing. The struggle comes when we want something other than this, when we grasp at pleasant sensations and push away unpleasant ones, when we build stories about who we are and what we need to be complete. This grasping, this pushing, this building is like wind moving across water. It creates waves, ripples, disturbance. And we come to believe the disturbance is the nature of the water itself. Nibbana is not about destroying the water. It is about seeing what happens when the wind of craving stops. You do not need to believe this. You do not need to adopt it as a philosophy. You can simply notice in this moment what grasping feels like. Perhaps there is a subtle tension in the body. Perhaps the mind is reaching toward the next thought, the next plan, the next moment of stimulation. This reaching is not wrong. It is just what the mind does when it has been conditioned to seek, to acquire, to become. But you can feel it. You can know it as it happens. And in that knowing, something loosens. The pond does not decide to be still. The conditions that create disturbance simply pass. And what is revealed is not a new state, but the absence of agitation. The water was always there. The stillness was always possible. This is why Nibbana is called the unconditioned. It is not produced by causes. It is not built through accumulation. It is what remains when the conditions for suffering are no longer fed. When craving is seen clearly and released. When the sense of a separate self struggling to maintain itself is recognized as a construction, not a fact. You might hear this and feel a kind of longing, a desire for that peace. And that is natural. That longing is itself part of the wind. It is the mind, conditioned by years of seeking, doing what it knows how to do. But even this can be observed. Even this can be held with gentleness. Bring attention to the breath now, not to change it, not to make it deeper or slower, just to feel it as it is. The coolness at the nostrils, the gentle rise and fall of the chest or belly. The breath does not belong to you. It is not your breath. It is simply breathing, happening within this body, conditioned by air and lungs and the autonomic nervous system. And in this moment, there is no problem to solve. There is just this, the body breathing. Sounds in the room or outside. The hum of existence, neither good nor bad. Nibbana is not far from this. It is not hidden behind years of meditation or perfect conduct. It is the peace that is always available when we stop insisting that this moment be other than it is. When we stop feeding the fire of wanting, of becoming, of clinging to what cannot be held. The pond does not grasp at stillness. It does not fear the wind. It simply receives what comes and returns to its nature when conditions allow. We will explore this together, not as a distant goal, but as something we can touch in each moment of clear seeing. You have probably felt it before, though you may not have named it. A fever breaking in the night. The body has been burning for hours, restless and tight, and then something shifts. The heat begins to leave, the skin cools, the breath steadies. You are not doing anything to make this happen. You are simply there as the fire goes out. This is closer to what the Buddha meant by nibbana than any idea of paradise or reward. It is not a place you travel to. It is not an achievement you add to yourself. It is the cooling of the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion. When those flames quiet, what remains is not emptiness, it is peace. But we do not usually think of peace this way. We think of it as something we need to find, something we must work toward, something that will arrive once conditions are right. We search for it in outcomes, in security, in the resolution of problems. We believe that once we have enough, once we are safe enough, once we are understood enough, then peace will come. And so we keep moving, keep grasping, keep arranging the pieces of our lives, hoping that the next arrangement will finally bring the stillness we long for. What we do not see is that the searching itself is the heat, the wanting is the fire. You can feel this directly. Notice what happens in the body when you want something you do not have. There is a tightness, a leaning forward, a sense of incompleteness. The mind begins to spin scenarios. The chest may constrict. The breath shortens. This is not peace. This is burning. Now notice what happens when wanting stops, even for a moment. You are sitting, you are breathing. There is nothing you need to get right now, nothing you need to change. The body softens, the breath deepens, the mind is still. This is not something you created. It was already here. You simply stopped adding fuel to the fire. The fever metaphor is useful because it reminds us that peace is not constructed. When a fever breaks, you do not build coolness. You stop burning. The body returns to its natural temperature. Nibbana is like this. It is not an exotic state you must achieve. It is what remains when the fires of craving, aversion, and confusion are no longer fed. This is why the Buddha did not describe Nibbana as a thing to be grasped. He described it as a release, a letting go, an unbinding. The language points not to acquisition, but to cessation. When the fire stops, coolness is obvious. It does not need to be explained or proven. You feel it. But we are so used to the heat that we mistake it for normal. We think the restlessness, the wanting, the pushing and pulling are just part of being alive. We do not realize we are burning until the flames quiet for a moment and we feel the difference. This is where practice becomes simple. You do not need to create peace. You only need to notice when wanting stops. This can happen anywhere. You finish a task and there is a pause before the next one. You take a sip of water and for a moment there is no thought of what comes next. You look out a window and the mind is not narrating or planning. It is just looking. In that moment, the fire is not burning. You are not reaching. You are not resisting. You are simply here. These moments are brief, but they are real. And they show you something important. Peace is not far away. It is not reserved for monks or mystics. It is what is left when you stop adding heat. The practice then is not to force anything. It is just to notice. Once today or once this week, see if you can catch the moment when wanting stops. Not because you made it stop, but because it stopped on its own. Maybe after you set something down. Maybe in the space between breaths. Maybe when you realize you have been standing still for a few seconds without needing to move. When you notice that moment, do not rush past it. Do not immediately fill it with the next thought or task. Let yourself feel the coolness. Let yourself recognize what it is like when the fire is not burning. This is not a technique to master. It is just a way of seeing what is already true. The fever breaks in the night, and the body knows relief. You do not have to understand why. You do not have to make it happen again. You just feel the difference between heat and coolness, and you know. We speak of peace as though it were a place we arrive at after a long journey. We imagine it waiting for us somewhere beyond the noise. But when we sit quietly and consider what we truly long for, we may notice something unexpected. The peace we seek is not the addition of something new, it is the absence of a particular kind of struggle. There is a word in the early text that points to this: nibbana. Sometimes translated as extinction, sometimes as unbinding. The word itself makes many of us uneasy. Extinction sounds like annihilation. It sounds like the end of everything we know ourselves to be. And so we approach the teaching with one hand reaching forward and one hand pulling back. The fear is understandable. We have spent our entire lives building and maintaining a sense of who we are. We have preferences and memories and plans. We have people we love and work we care about. When we hear that the path leads to the cessation of something, we assume it must be the cessation of all this. We imagine ourselves dissolving into nothing. But watch what happens when you make a fist around a handful of sand. The grains press against your palm. Your fingers curl tight. The harder you squeeze, the more the sand finds its way out between your knuckles. The effort to hold creates its own discomfort. Your hand begins to ache, and still you squeeze, because letting go feels like loss. What the teaching points to is simpler than we expect. It is not you that ceases, but the clinging to you. Not the hand, but the fist. Not the experience of living, but the constant grasping at experience as though it could be frozen and kept. This distinction matters. We confuse the self with the act of grasping at self. We think we are the tightness in the hand, when really we are the hand itself. The tightness is something the hand does, not something the hand is. And because we have been doing it for so long, we no longer notice the difference. Craving is the word the Buddha used for this grasping. It appears in the second noble truth as the origin of suffering. But craving is not desire itself. It is not the simple wanting of food when hungry or rest when tired. Craving is the added layer, the insistence that things be other than they are. The tightening around what we have, the reaching toward what we lack, the pushing away of what we dislike. You can feel this in the body if you pay attention. There is a subtle tension that runs beneath ordinary experience, a low hum of dissatisfaction. Even in pleasant moments, there is often a faint anxiety that the pleasantness will end. Even in neutral moments, there is a restlessness, a sense that something is missing. Try this now, if you are willing. Find a small object near you, a coin, a stone, a piece of paper, something light enough to hold easily. Place it in your palm and close your fingers around it, not crushing it, but holding it firmly. Feel the pressure of your grip. Notice the effort required to maintain it. Hold it this way for 1 minute. Let yourself become curious about the sensation. The object is not trying to escape, you are not in danger of losing it. And yet the hand stays closed. There is work happening, subtle musculation, a kind of vigilance. When the minute has passed, open your hand slowly. Let the fingers uncurl, feel the release in the muscles. The object remains where it is, resting in your open palm. Nothing was lost. But something has changed. The effort has stopped. This is the gesture the teaching points toward. The fist becoming an open hand, not empty, but no longer clenching. The sand can rest there without being captured. It can shift and settle. It can even blow away if the wind comes. And the hand remains a hand, capable and present, no longer exhausted by its own grip. When we begin to see this in our own experience, something shifts. We notice how much of what we call I is actually this continuous clenching. The stories we tell about who we are, the narratives we defend, the image we try to project, these are not the self. These are things the mind does in an attempt to secure the self, to make it solid and permanent. But nothing in experience is permanent. Sensations arise and pass, thoughts come and go. Even the sense of being someone, of being here, flickers and changes moment to moment. What we are protecting does not need protection. What we are trying to hold cannot be held. The peace beyond words is not the peace of having everything we want. It is the peace of no longer needing to clench around anything at all. We spend most of our lives moving toward something, the next breath, the next thought, the next moment when things will finally feel complete. Even in meditation, we often sit with a quiet urgency, waiting for peace to arrive like a package we ordered. But Nibbana is not waiting at the end of that road. It is not a destination in time. The Buddha spoke of something unborn, unmade, unconditioned. He said if there were not such a thing, there would be no escape from the born, the made, the conditioned. This is not poetry for its own sake. It points to something we can sense but rarely rest in. The unconditioned does not appear after we finish becoming. It is here, beneath the stream of becoming, like silence beneath sound. Think of two notes played in sequence. We hear the notes clearly. We might even hum them back, but between those notes there is silence. Not the silence that comes after the music ends, the silence that holds the music together. Without it, there would be no melody, only noise collapsing into itself. That silence does not begin or end. It does not depend on the notes depend on it. We look for Nibbana, the way we look for the next note. We think it will come if we practice long enough, sit deeply enough, let go completely enough, and practice does matter, letting go does matter. But we are still looking in time. We are still waiting for something to be born. And what is born will pass. What arises will cease. This is the nature of the conditioned. Nibbana is not one more thing that arises. It is the ground that does not arise. It does not come into being, so it does not pass away. It is not made, so it cannot break. It is not born, so it does not die. This is why it cannot be described the way we describe experiences. Experiences happen in time. They have a beginning, a middle, a shape. Nibbana has no shape. It is what remains when we stop building. You might sit down to meditate and notice the mind moving, a thought about yesterday, a plan for later, a sensation in the knee, the breath moving in and out. All of this is conditioned. Each moment depends on the moment before. Each thought leans on the last. But if you sit very still, not chasing and not pushing away, you may notice something else. Just before a thought begins, there is a space. Not empty in the sense of lacking, just open, unformed. That space does not ask for your attention. It does not announce itself. It is quieter than the quietest thought. But it is there. It is always there. The mind moves through it, the way a bird moves through sky. We see the bird. We rarely see the sky. This is not about achieving a special state. It is not about silencing all thoughts forever or reaching some inner blank. It is about noticing what was never not here. The unconditioned does not hide behind the conditioned. It allows the conditioned to appear. Like silence allows sound, like space allows form. When you sit, let the breath come and go as it does. Let thoughts arrive, let them leave. Do not try to stop the stream, but notice the space before a thought begins, not by looking hard, not by concentrating until your eyes ache, just by resting, by being still enough that the space reveals itself. You will not find it by effort. Effort is conditioned. It arises and passes. But you will not find it by doing nothing either, if doing nothing is just another strategy, another plan in time. You find it by no longer looking for what comes next, by letting the next moment be unimportant, by touching, even briefly, what does not move. The silence between two notes is not the absence of music, it is what makes music possible. Without it, there is no rhythm, no rest, no room for the next note to matter. In the same way, the unconditioned is not the absence of life. It is what makes life bearable. It is the peace that does not depend on circumstances. The refuge that is not built and cannot fall. You will not be able to describe it afterward. Not fully. Words are conditioned. They point, but they cannot hold what does not have edges. Still, you will know, not as knowledge that can be repeated, as a kind of rest that asks for nothing. There is a strange confusion at the heart of practice. We sit down to meditate in order to become peaceful. We watch the breath so that one day we will not need to watch the breath. We practice letting go so that letting go will become automatic. The whole endeavor seems to rest on a contradiction. We are trying to stop trying. This is not a flaw in the path, it is the path noticing itself. A river flows downhill without trying. It does not need a course in how to flow. It does not practice flowing on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The water simply moves according to its nature, meeting each stone and bend as it comes. And yet the river has carved canyons. It has shaped entire valleys, not through force, through continuous, effortless contact with what is here. The Zen tradition holds this paradox lightly. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The words offer no dramatic transformation, no special state that arrives and changes everything. Just wood, just water, just the doing. At first this can sound disappointing. We come to practice hoping for something more, a shift in consciousness, a permanent calm, a self that no longer struggles. And here is this teaching, suggesting that the chopping and carrying continue exactly as before. But look more closely. The teaching does not say the experience is identical. It says the action is identical. The wood is still wood. The water is still water. What changes is not the task. It is the one doing the task. Or more precisely, it is the absence of the one who believes they are separate from the task. When you chop wood while wanting to be done chopping wood, the action is divided. There is you, and there is the wood, and there is the gap between where you are and where you want to be. The mind is already in the next moment, or the moment after that, or the evening when the work is finished. The body is here. The attention is elsewhere. This is suffering. Not because chopping wood is inherently painful, but because you are not whole. When you chop wood and there is only chopping, the division dissolves. The hand lifts the axe falls, the wood splits. No one is doing it, or everyone is doing it. The distinction stops mattering. This is not a mystical state. It is simply what happens when the mind stops insisting on being somewhere other than where it is. The river does not flow in order to arrive at the ocean. It flows because flowing is what water does when the ground slopes and nothing blocks the way. If you dam the river, it pools. If you open the dam, it flows again. It does not need to remember how. The nature of water has not changed. Your nature has not changed either. The effort you feel in practice is not effort to become something new. It is effort to stop pretending you are something you are not. You are not separate from this moment. You never have been. But the mind has learned to create that separation, and the habit is strong. So there is practice, not to build a new self, to see through the old one. This is where the paradox softens. You cannot force yourself to stop forcing, but you can notice forcing when it arises. You can feel the tension in the shoulders, the tightness in the jaw, the way the breath becomes shallow when you are trying to make something happen. And in the noticing, something releases. Not because you made it release, because seeing clearly is itself a kind of release. Today, choose one ordinary task: washing a dish, folding a shirt, walking from one room to another. Do it with full attention. Not with the attention that is trying to be mindful, with the attention that is simply here, meeting what is here. Notice the temperature of the water, the texture of the fabric, the feeling of your foot touching the ground. If the mind moves toward what comes next, let it move. Then return, not as a correction, as a natural settling. There is no goal beyond the doing. This is not because goals are wrong. It is because in this moment, this task is complete in itself. The dish does not need to be washed so that you can move on to the next thing. It is being washed because it is being washed. The river does not flow in order to reach the next bend. It flows and the bend appears. You may find that the task takes longer than usual, or you may find that it takes less time. You may feel calm, you may feel restless. None of this matters. What matters is the quality of contact. Are you here, or are you leaning into the next moment? When you notice you are leaning, you have already returned. The noticing is the returning. This is practice, not the accumulation of peaceful moments. The willingness to meet this moment as it is. The wood does not become sacred, the water does not become holy. They remain exactly what they are, and so do you. You have likely noticed how a small irritation can go into something much larger. Someone speaks to you in a certain tone, and before you realize what is happening, your chest has tightened, your thoughts have sharpened, and the rest of your day carries the weight of that moment. This is not unusual. This is how suffering continues, not because the original moment was so terrible, but because we keep adding to it, breath after breath, without seeing that we are doing so. A campfire dies when no one adds wood. This is simple physics. The flame consumes what is available, and when nothing more is offered, the heat fades and the embers cool. But we do not often think of our own aversion this way. We believe the fire is happening to us, that we are being burned by circumstances or other people. We do not notice that we are the ones carrying logs, one after another, keeping the blaze alive. Aversion feels justified. When something unpleasant arises, the mind moves quickly to push it away, to argue with it, to replay it until it makes sense or until someone is clearly at fault. This movement feels necessary, even protective. But if you watch closely, you will see that the original unpleasant sensation is often brief. It is the reaction that lingers, the thought that returns again and again. The tightness that does not release because you are still feeding it with attention, with resistance, with the need for things to be different than they are. The Buddha spoke of this with great clarity. When fuel is exhausted, the fire goes out by itself. He was not speaking only of the final liberation, though that is included. He was also speaking of the small fires, the daily irritations, the moments when we could choose to stop adding wood but do not, because we have not yet learned to recognize what we are doing. You can begin to see this in real time. When irritation arises, the impulse is immediate. The body braces, the mind narrows. There is a story forming about why this should not be happening, about what it means, about what must be done. But before all of that, there is just a sensation, a tightness, a heat, a pulling away. If you can meet that moment without immediately acting on it, something shifts. Not because you have fixed anything, but because you have stopped adding fuel. This is where the practice becomes direct. When irritation arises, watch it without reacting for 3 breaths. Not to suppress it, not to make it go away, just to see it clearly. 1 breath, and the sensation is still there. 2 breaths, and you notice the urge to speak, to move, to justify. 3 breaths, and something in the quality of the experience has changed. It has not necessarily disappeared, but it is no longer being fed. The fire is still warm, but you are not reaching for more wood. This is not about becoming passive. It is about seeing the difference between responding and reacting. Reacting is automatic. It is the hand reaching for the log without thinking. Responding is spacious. It allows the moment to be what it is before deciding what, if anything, needs to happen next. You will forget this many times. The habit of feeding aversion is old and deeply rooted. But each time you remember, even for 3 breaths, you are learning something essential. You are learning that you participate in your own burning. Not because you are doing something wrong, but because this is how the mind works when it has not been trained to see clearly. The campfire does not judge itself for burning, it simply burns until there is nothing left to consume. And when you stop feeding it, it dies down naturally, without force, without drama. The peace the Buddha pointed to, the peace beyond words, is not somewhere else. It is what remains when the fire is allowed to go out. Not because you have defeated anything, but because you have stopped participating in the conditions that keep it alive. This is Nibbana in its simplest form, the cessation that comes from non-fueling, the quiet that arrives when you are no longer adding to the noise. You do not need to wait for perfect conditions. The next time irritation arises, you can meet it with 3 breaths, just 3. And in that small space, you may glimpse what it means to let the fire die on its own. We speak of Nibbana as though it were somewhere else, a faraway shore, a final resting place, something we might one day arrive at if we practice long enough, sit still enough, let go completely enough. The mind builds an image of perfect peace and places it in the future, just beyond reach. And then we become the one who must get there. But this is where the teaching turns. A wave rising in the ocean does not need to travel anywhere to become water. It already is water. It has always been water. The wave is a temporary form, a shape the ocean takes for a moment. When it subsides, nothing is lost. Nothing was ever separate to begin with. In the same way, what we call samsara and what we call nirvana are not 2 different places. They are not divided by distance or time. The difference is only in how we see. When we believe in a solid self that suffers, that clings, that needs to be saved, we experience samsara. When that belief relaxes, what remains is the same reality, seen without the filter of me and mine. This is not a metaphor for something else. It is pointing directly at what is happening now. Right now, in this moment, there is seeing, hearing, breathing, thinking. Sensations arise and pass. Thoughts come and go. But where is the one who owns all this? Where is the traveler who must reach Nibbana? If you look closely, you will not find a solid entity at the center of experience. You will find processes, conditions meeting and separating, patterns of habit and response, but no unchanging self who stands apart from it all, directing the show. The wave believes it is separate because it has a distinct shape. It rises, it crests, it falls. It seems to have a beginning and an end. But if the wave could look deeply, it would see that its substance is ocean. Its movement is ocean moving. Its dissolution is ocean returning to itself. There was never a moment when the wave was not ocean. This is where the practice becomes intimate, not as a technique to achieve something, but as a way of looking that reveals what has always been true. You can ask quietly, without force, without expectation, who is it that wants peace? Not as a riddle to solve, not as a question that demands an answer in words, but as a gentle inquiry that turns attention back to its source. Who is wanting? Who is seeking? Who believes they are trapped in samsara and must escape to Nibbana? When you ask this way, something shifts. The question does not lead to a conclusion. It leads to a softening. The sense of being a separate self, as someone who lacks peace and must find it, begins to loosen. You may notice that the wanting itself is just another arising, another wave. It appears, it moves through awareness, it fades. But it is not you. It is not owned by anyone. This does not mean the wanting disappears forever. It may return. Waves keep rising. But each time you ask, each time you look, without grasping for an answer, the identification weakens. The belief that you are the wave, rather than the ocean, becomes less solid. And here the teaching deepens. Samsara is not a place you are trapped in. Nirvana is not a place you must reach. They are two names for the same reality, seen through different lenses. When there is clinging, when there is the belief in a self that must protect itself, must improve itself, must one day be free, that is samsara. When that clinging releases, even for a moment, what is left is the peace that was never absent. It was only obscured by the belief in separation. The wave does not become ocean by striving. It does not need to improve itself or purify itself or wait for the right conditions. It simply sees what it has always been. And in that seeing, the question of how to reach the shore dissolves. There is no shore. There is no journey. There is only this. So the practice is not about getting somewhere. It is about recognizing what is already here. You ask, who wants peace? And you wait. Not for an answer, but for the question to reveal its own emptiness. You watch as the sense of being a someone softens, as the boundary between self and experience becomes transparent. And in that transparency, there is a quiet opening. Not dramatic, not final, just a small release, a momentary glimpse of the ocean beneath the wave. This may happen many times. The question arises, the inquiry deepens, the sense of self loosens, and then it reforms. This is natural. The pattern of self-making is old and strong. But each time you look, the grip weakens. The belief becomes less convincing. And gradually, the peace you are seeking reveals itself as the ground you have been standing on all along. We spend so much time searching for something solid, a place where the ground stops shifting, a feeling that will last. We want peace, but we imagine it as stillness that never breaks, a refuge where nothing can touch us. And so we look for it in achievements, in relationships, in beliefs we can hold on to tightly. We think if we arrange things just right, the movement will stop. But everything keeps moving. A leaf floats on a stream. It doesn't fight the current. It doesn't try to anchor itself to a rock or cling to the bank. It moves because the water moves. The leaf hasn't failed at being still. It was never meant to be still. The stream carries it forward, and the leaf simply goes. The Buddha spoke clearly about this. All conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering, not turns away from life. Turns away from the struggle against what life actually is. The suffering comes from wanting the stream to stop, from wanting the leaf to stay in one place forever. You can feel this in your own body right now. Your breath moves. It comes in, it goes out. It never stays. If it stayed, you would die. The breath knows what it's doing. It moves because movement is life. And yet somewhere in us, we keep reaching for the breath that will finally satisfy us, the one that will make us feel complete and never leave. Watch your breath for a moment, not to control it, just to see it, see how it changes. Each breath is different, deeper, shallower, faster, slower. The texture shifts, the temperature shifts. There is no standard breath you're supposed to achieve. There is only this breath and then the next one, and they are never the same. This is where the practice lives, not in stopping the movement, but in seeing it, really seeing it. When you watch something change, you stop fighting it. You stop trying to freeze it in place. The leaf floating on the stream doesn't need to understand the stream. It doesn't need the water to explain itself. It just moves with what is. You can do this with anything. The light in your room changes as the day passes. Watch it. Don't try to hold it at the golden hour. Just see it shift. The sounds around you rise and fall. A car passes. A bird calls. Silence returns, but not the same silence. Something in it has changed. Your own sensations move through you. Warmth, coolness, pressure, ease. They come, they stay for a moment, they go. This isn't resignation. It isn't giving up. It's the opposite. It's meeting life as it actually arrives. When you see impermanence clearly, you stop demanding that things be other than they are. You stop exhausting yourself trying to nail down what cannot be nailed down. The peace that the Buddha spoke of, Nibbana, isn't a place you get to by making everything stop. It's what remains when you stop fighting the movement. Think of the leaf again. It doesn't suffer as it floats. It doesn't panic when the current speeds up or despair when it slows down. It's in the water, completely. And because it doesn't resist, it doesn't break. We imagine that surrender means being destroyed. But the leaf shows us something different. It shows us that moving with what is can be effortless. Today, choose one thing. Just one. Your breath is always there, so that's easy. But you could also choose the light coming through a window, the sounds in your space, a sensation in your hands or your feet. Watch it change, not once, but over time. See how it never stays the same. This isn't a meditation you have to do perfectly. You don't have to sit in a special way or close your eyes unless you want to. You can do this while you're washing dishes or waiting for water to boil. Just bring your attention to something that moves and let yourself see the movement. What happens when you do this is subtle. You start to feel less at war. The need to control loosens just a little. You see that the stream keeps flowing whether you clench or release. And in that seeing, something softens. The peace isn't in stopping the stream, it's in letting the leaf float. It's in being the leaf. Moving, changing, completely here, and somehow, finally, at rest. We spend years searching for the door to peace. We read about Nibbana, we hear it described in careful language, and we begin to look for the entrance. We imagine it must be through deeper concentration, or through perfect understanding, or through some moment of breakthrough we have not yet earned. We sit and we wait for the gate to appear. But a bird flying through open sky does not search for a way into the air. It is already there, it has always been there. The sky holds it without effort, without condition. The old teaching says the great way has no gate. Thousands of roads enter it. This is not poetry meant to inspire. It is a simple observation. If there is no gate, then there is nothing to find. If thousands of roads enter, then you are already on one of them. The search itself assumes you are standing outside, but you have never been outside. We create the sense of being locked out. We do this by treating peace as a destination, as a state we will arrive at once. We have done enough, understood enough, released enough, released enough. We make Nibbana into something over there, something separate from this moment, and then we suffer the distance we invented. The bird does not think about the sky. It does not wonder if it is flying correctly. It moves, and the air is there. When it rests, the air is still there. The sky does not withhold itself until the bird has learned to fly more gracefully. You might sit down right now, not to achieve anything, not to get closer to peace or to finally break through. Just sit. Let the body settle. Let the breath move as it moves. 5 minutes. No goal. No measurement. This is not a technique to bring you to Nibbana. It is simply sitting without the story that you are far from it. When you stop searching for the entrance, you may notice that there was never a wall. The sense of separation was made of thought, made of the belief that peace is somewhere else, earned by someone more worthy or more advanced. Striving has a texture. You can feel it in the chest, in the tightness of the jaw, in the way the mind leans forward into the next moment. It is not wrong to strive, but you can notice it. You can feel what it is like to sit without that leaning. Not forever. Just now. Just for these 5 minutes. The breath comes in, the breath goes out. Sounds arise. Sensations move through the body. Thoughts appear and dissolve. None of this requires your management. It happens in the same way the bird is held by the sky, without negotiation, without a contract. You may find yourself checking. Am I doing this right? Is this it? Am I closer? These questions are the mind looking for the gate again. You do not need to fight them. Just notice. The question arises. It passes. The sitting continues. The bird does not ask if it is in the sky correctly. It is simply there, moving or still, and the sky remains. In the same way you are already within the great way. You have always been. The peace you imagine as distant is not withheld. It is here, underneath the seeking, underneath the belief that you must find it first. Sit without seeking anything. Let the 5 minutes be just 5 minutes, no special state, no confirmation. When the mind reaches for progress, feel that reaching. When it relaxes, feel that too. Neither is better. Both happen in the same openness. This is not about convincing yourself that you have arrived. It is about noticing what is already true. The way has no gate because there is no outside. The thousands of roads are not leading you toward peace. They are expressions of it. Each breath, each moment of sitting, each time you notice the striving and let it be without adding more striving on top. You may sit and feel restless. You may sit and feel calm. You may sit and feel nothing remarkable at all. The sky holds the bird in all of these conditions. The great way does not exclude your restlessness or your doubt. It has no gate to keep you out. When the striving falls away, even for a moment, what remains is just this. Just sitting. The breath. The body. The room. No distance, no door to open, only the simplicity of being here, which was never unavailable. We sometimes imagine that peace lives in isolation, that it arrives when we step away from the world, close the door, and finally rest alone. There is truth in solitude, of course. Silence has its place. But the deeper stillness we seek does not require us to turn away from others. It does not ask us to build walls or hold ourselves apart. When the heart is free, compassion flows like water from a spring. This is not something we manufacture. It is not a project we take on after we have found our own calm. The freedom and the care arise together, like breathing in and breathing out. They are not separate events. Sunlight does not choose where it falls. It warms the stone and the grass, the still pond and the restless street. It does not ask if something deserves its warmth. It simply reaches what is there. This is closer to what happens when the heart opens. Not because we have become good people, not because we have trained ourselves to care, but because the tightness that kept us separate has loosened. We spend much of our time protecting a small territory. This is mine. That is yours. I am here, you are there. The boundary feels necessary. It feels like survival, and in some ways it is. But we also notice how tiring it becomes, how much energy it takes to keep everything sorted, to maintain the edge between self and other. What if that edge is softer than we think? You might try something simple today. Choose one person. It does not need to be someone you love deeply or someone you struggle with. Just one person who crosses your mind or your path. Wish them well. Not out loud, not in a message, just quietly in your own awareness. Let the wish be uncomplicated. May you be at ease. May you find what you need. Something like that. You do not need them to know. You do not need anything to change. This is not about results. It is about noticing what happens in you when you let care move without expecting return. Sunlight does not wait for the ground to thank it. It continues. And in continuing, It reveals something about its nature. It is not withholding. It is not calculating. It simply does what it does. The same is true when the heart is not clenched. Compassion is not added on top of peace. It is what peace looks like when it meets another life. You do not have to become a different person. You do not have to fix yourself first. The wishing itself is part of the softening. You might notice resistance. That is fine. Resistance is just another texture of experience. It does not mean you are doing it wrong. Sometimes the mind says, but I barely have enough for myself. Sometimes it says, why should I care about them? These thoughts are not problems. They are just what the mind does when it feels the boundary shifting. Let them be there. Wish the person well anyway. Not because you should, not because it is virtuous, but because you are curious what happens when you stop holding so tightly to the line between your peace and theirs. What you may find is that the wishing does not drain you. It does not take anything away. It is more like opening a window. The air moves. Something that was stale begins to clear. This is not about becoming a saint. It is about noticing that the heart, when it is not defended, naturally includes. Not in a grand way, not with fanfare. Just in the same way sunlight touches what is near. You do not have to reach far. You do not have to love the whole world at once. One person, one quiet wish. That is enough. And if you forget, or if the wish feels mechanical, that is also fine. You are not trying to perform compassion. You are simply noticing whether the gate can open a little, whether care can exist without needing to announce itself. When the heart is free, it does not hoard its freedom. It does not say, this is mine alone. It moves the way water moves from a spring, without asking permission, without checking if the ground is worthy. It flows because that is what it does when nothing blocks it. You may find that wishing someone well, even silently, even briefly, changes the way you hold yourself in the world. Not dramatically, not all at once, but you might notice a little less bracing, a little more room. And in that room, the old belief that peace requires separation begins to loosen. You see that caring for another does not cost you your calm. It is part of the same opening. We speak of peace as though it lives somewhere else, as though it waits in a quieter season, a calmer mind, a more spacious life. We imagine it arriving once the conditions align, once we have done enough, once we have finally learned how. And so we carry the weight of now while reaching toward then. But peace does not wait in the future. It is not stored away for later retrieval. It exists only in this moment, and this moment is the only one we ever have. A mirror reflects whatever appears before it. It does not hold yesterday's image or rehearse tomorrow's scene. It simply meets what is without preference, without delay. The face that was there a moment ago has already passed. The face that will come has not yet arrived. Only this face now is reflected clearly. Our minds are not so simple. We carry traces of what has been. We project outlines of what might be. And in the space between memory and anticipation, the present moment slips by unnoticed. We are here, but we are not attending. We are breathing, but we are not feeling the breath. We are alive, but we are living elsewhere. The teaching is plain. Do not chase the past or long for the future. The past is gone. The future has not come. The present is here. These are not poetic phrases meant to inspire. They are observations about the nature of time and attention. The past exists only as memory. The future exists only as imagination. Both are mental events happening now. And when we mistake these mental events for reality, we lose contact with the only reality there is. This is not a call to ignore the past or abandon planning. It is a recognition that peace cannot be found in what is no longer here or not yet here. It can only be found in what is, Notice this breath just as it is without wanting it different. Not the breath you wish you were taking, slow and steady and full of grace. Not the breath you took a moment ago or the one you will take next. This breath, exactly as it moves through you now, shallow or deep, smooth or jagged, easy or effortful. The mirror does not ask the reflection to be other than it is, it simply receives. Equanimity is not indifference, it is not the absence of feeling or the suppression of preference. It is the capacity to meet experience without immediately needing to change it, to feel the breath as it is, to notice the tightness in the chest without rushing to release it, to hear the mind's commentary without being swept into its story. This is not passivity, it is clear seeing. When we postpone peace, we are often postponing this simple act of meeting. We tell ourselves that peace will come when the breath is calmer, when the mind is quieter, when the circumstances are kinder. But peace is not the product of ideal conditions. It is the willingness to be present with conditions as they are. The mirror does not wait for a beautiful face to appear before it reflects. It reflects the tired face, the worried face, the ordinary face, just as readily. And in that reflection, there is no judgment, no commentary, no wish for something else. There is only what is, seen clearly. You might notice as you sit here now that the mind is already somewhere else, planning the next hour, reviewing the last conversation, wondering if this practice is working. This is not a problem to solve. It is simply what the mind does. But you can notice it. You can feel the pull toward elsewhere and choose, gently, to return. Not because returning is virtuous, but because peace is only ever here. The breath continues whether you notice it or not. It does not wait for your attention. It does not require your approval. It simply moves in and out, moment by moment. And when you bring your attention to it, just as it is, you are no longer living in the gap between memory and anticipation. You are here. This is not a technique to master. It is a return to what has always been available. The present moment is not a destination you arrive at after sufficient practice. It is where you already are. You have never been anywhere else. But attention wanders and we forget. We forget that peace is not something we build toward, it is something we notice when we stop building. The mirror reflects without holding. It does not cling to the image that has passed or anticipate the one to come. And in that letting go, there is a stillness that requires no effort. The breath moves, the body sits, the moment unfolds. And peace, if we are willing to call it that, is simply this, being here without needing it to be otherwise. The teachings point to something, but they cannot hand it to you. They are like a finger pointing at the moon. You can look at the finger for years, study its shape, memorize its angle, or you can follow where it points and see the moon yourself. Nibbana is not earned through accumulation. It is not built by adding more effort, more understanding, more virtue. It is what remains when the adding stops. When the grasping quiets, when the mind no longer leans forward or pulls back, but rests in what is already here. This does not mean you do nothing. It means you stop doing in order to become. You stop performing peace and allow it to reveal itself. The breath continues. Sensations arise and pass. Thoughts come and go like clouds. But the one watching, the one aware, does not cling to any of it. There is a pond in the forest. When the wind blows, the surface ripples and you cannot see through the water. When animals come to drink, the surface breaks into fragments. When rain falls, the whole pond seems to tremble. But when nothing disturbs it, the water becomes so still that you can see straight to the bottom. You can see stones, leaves, the slow movement of small creatures. The clarity was always there. It was only hidden by movement. The mind is like this. When craving stirs it, when aversion pushes against it, when restlessness or doubt or clinging move through it, you cannot see clearly. But these are not permanent features of the mind. They are weather, they are conditions, and conditions change. Nibbana is the stillness that is always beneath the weather. It is not far away. It is not reserved for saints or monastics or people with better concentration than you. It is the natural state of a mind that has stopped fighting itself. You do not need to become someone else to touch this. You do not need to purify yourself into perfection. You only need to see clearly what causes suffering and stop feeding it. You need to see that clinging burns and let go. Not once, but again and again, in small ways, in ordinary moments. The path is not dramatic. It is quiet. It is the choice to return to the breath when the mind wanders. It is the willingness to feel discomfort without immediately reaching for relief. It is the softening that happens when you stop insisting that life be other than it is. And in that softening, something opens. Not a grand revelation, not a lightning strike of insight, just a gentle release, a sense of space, a quiet that does not need to be filled. You may not call it Nibbana. You may not call it anything, but you will recognize it. It feels like coming home after a long journey. It feels like setting down a weight you did not know you were carrying. The teachings are here when you need them. The breath is always here. The body is always receiving sensation. Awareness is always present. These are not special tools. They are the ground you are already standing on. If you find yourself returning to these ideas, that is natural. The mind needs reminding. It forgets that peace is simple. It gets caught again in the old habits of grasping and pushing away. So you return. You listen again. You sit again. You notice again. There is no rush. The water does not hurry to become still. It simply stops being disturbed. And in that stopping, clarity appears on its own. If it serves you, let another teaching come. Let the words continue to point. But know that the pointing is only useful if you are willing to look. And looking does not require force. It requires willingness. It requires the kind of attention that is soft and steady, like watching rain fall into a river. The rain does not ask permission. It does not announce itself. It simply falls. And the river receives it without effort. The surface moves for a moment, then settles again. This is how insight comes. This is how peace arrives, not through striving, but through allowing. Rest here as long as you need. Let the stillness find you.